afternoon and welcome to our TV show featuring documentaries revealing the realities behind myths using research and scholarship. I'm your host, Ergün Kırlıkovalı, and I will be with you every Sunday at 4 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. You're welcome to send me your feedback at www.mythsandrealities.com. Greet this magnificent U.S. Navy ship, USS Bristol, hull number DD-453. Completed and placed in service in October 1941, this celebrated U.S. destroyer was named to honor a great American hero, Admiral Mark Lambert Bristol. USS Bristol, DD-453, participated in the landings in North Africa, Sicily, and Salerno, southwest Italy. She received 3 battle stars for her valiant World War II service. When the USS Bristol was sunk off the coast of Algeria in 1943 by a German U-boat, the US Navy immediately constructed and launched in 1944 another destroyer. It was also called USS Bristol with hull number DD-857, so that Admiral Bristol's legacy could live on. So who was Admiral Mark Lambert Bristol, whom Armenians hate passionately to this day? Born in 1868 in Glassboro, New Jersey, Bristol graduated from the U.S. Naval Academy in 1887. During the Spanish-American War of 1898, he participated in the Battle of Santiago de Cuba. From 1901 to 1903, he served as aide to the Commander-in-Chief, North Atlantic Fleet. He commanded the battleship USS Oklahoma during World War I. Bristol, in the years 1919-1927, served as the commander of the U.S. Naval Detachment in Turkish waters and as the U.S. High Commissioner to Turkey. In this capacity, he witnessed firsthand the Turkish War of Independence, the formation of the First Turkish Republic, and the early years of its existence. His papers, consisting of some 33,000 items, include reports, diaries, correspondence, copies of official dispatches, telegrams, and appointment sheets covering his entire career. The papers reflecting his tenure in Turkey from 1919 to 1927 reveal in great detail the character of political, military, social, and economic conditions in Anatolia during the turbulent period of post-World War I era. Bristol's intellectual correspondence, mostly based on formidable documents that he gathered, is often cited during discussions on numerous events of the time. He is known to be objective, accurate, honest, and fair, like an honorable soldier and a commander should be. So why do the Armenians hate him? And why do the Armenian-financed genocide scholars deliberately ignore his writings? 33,000 papers. Could it be because Bristol played a significant role in his opposition to Armenian fantasies of establishing an apartheid on Turkish soil under the cover of an American mandate? Bristol served as U.S. Commissioner in Turkey from 1919 to 1927. In 1927, Rear Admiral Bristol assumed command of Asiatic Fleet. He died 13th of May, 1939. One can get a more comprehensive bio in the register of Bristol's papers in the manuscript division of the Library of Congress. Bristol was down to earth and straightforward. When a Greek newspaper reporter blatantly twisted the facts of a conflict, Bristol commented, "The Greek reporter was typical of the races in this part of the country. She's obsequious, servile, and says she wants the truth, but she probably couldn't write the truth if she knew it," unquote. Bristol was observant and detail-oriented. He covered topics ranging from racial and religious conflicts in the Near East to the Armenian-set Great Fire of Izmir, and from the Allied activities in pursuit of selfish interests, mandates, and empire, to the decline of the Ottoman Empire and the rise of Mustafa Kemal and the nationalist movement that led to the founding of modern Turkey. Bristol also helped found the American hospital in Nişantaşı, Istanbul, and the annexed nursing school, which is still named Admiral Bristol Nursing School after him. After Bristol's death, he was honored by the renaming in 1945 of the American hospital to the Admiral Bristol American Hospital. It is amazing how Admiral and Ambassador Bristol's writings have been so overwhelmingly ignored by supporters of the alleged Armenian genocide. Most such partisan researchers must first battle their deep-seated prejudice against Turkey. Armenians and Greeks make the baseless claim that Bristol was pro-Turkish because in their minds, anyone who isn't anti-Turkish is presumed to be a lover of Turks. As if Bristol, growing up in the United States, a nation that almost always treats Turkey negatively in its media, religion, and politics, would have been exposed to reasons to love Turkey. Bristol was not a lover of Turks, as he had negative things to say about all the residents of the Near East, including the Turks. Looking back from our politically correct times, it is more challenging to interpret comments of 100 years ago. We need to evaluate comments in the context of those times. But if there's a record of virulently making racist statements all the time, such as in the cases of Ambassador Henry Morgenthau and the US Consul George Horton, then we can judge them for what kinds of men they really were. Morgenthau's following unfortunate comments, for example, are the epitome of racism. I quote, "The most beautiful and healthy Armenian girls could be taken, converted forcibly to Mohammedanism, and made the wives of or concubines of devout followers of the Prophet. Their children would then automatically become Muslims and so strengthen the empire as the Janissaries had strengthened it formerly. These Armenian girls represent a high type of womanhood, and the young Turks recognized that the mingling of Armenian blood with the Turkish population would exert a eugenic influence upon the whole," unquote. Now, anyone who makes extremely racist comments like these in this day and age would be immediately sued, tried, convicted, and placed behind bars. And we're talking about a US ambassador here, not a street hoodlum. What's even more tragic and ironic is for Morgenthau, a German-born Jew, to utter concepts like eugenics and betterment of a race through intermarriage, considering what was to come during the World War II, some 3 decades later. Anyway, back to Admiral Bristol's story. Bristol, who is now also Ambassador Bristol, his most popular letter I'm familiar with is the long one he wrote to Dr. Barton, the secretary of the American Board of Commissioners for Foreign Missions in 1921. Bristol's fairness, decency, and integrity are all plain to see. He wasn't trying to impress anybody. Bristol wrote, I quote, "I see that reports are being freely circulated in the United States that the Turks massacred thousands of Armenians in the Caucasus. Such reports are repeated so many times, it makes my blood boil. The nearest relief have the reports from Yarrow and our own American people, which show absolutely that such Armenian reports are absolutely false. The circulation of such false reports in the United States without refutation is an outrage and is certainly doing the Armenians more harm than good. I feel that we should discourage the Armenians in this kind of work, not only because it is wrong, but because they are injuring themselves. In addition to the reports from our own American relief workers that were in Kars and Alexandropol, and reports from men such as Yarrow, I have reports from my own intelligence officer and know that the Armenian reports are not true. Is there not something that you and the Near East Relief Committee can do to stop the circulation of such false reports? I was surprised to see that Dr. McCallum sent through a report along this line from Constantinople. When I called attention to the report, it was stated that it came from the Armenians, but the telegram did not state this, nor did it state that the Armenian reports were not confirmed by our own reports, unquote. Admiral Bristol witnessed firsthand the selfishness of the Armenians, and he objected to the US becoming involved with such a people. Admiral Bristol believed that it was in the best interest of the US to establish a partnership with first the Ottoman Empire and then the Republic of Turkey when it was formed in 1923. Americans owe a debt of gratitude to this great American hero. Bristol's vision for the future that helped the United States win the war, the Cold War. Because of Bristol's fair, honest, and respectful treatment of Turks, that Turkey became a true friend of the United States and helped America resist the onslaught of the Soviet Union communism. Turkey continues to be a great friend of the United States. Turkish and American soldiers fought shoulder to shoulder in the Korean War between 1950 and 1953 against communist aggression. The Turkish Army Infantry Brigade that served with the UN Command and attached to the US 25th Infantry Division fought in several actions and was awarded unit citations from Korea and the US Congress after fighting valiantly in the Battle of Kunuri. The Turkish Brigade developed a reputation for its fighting ability, stubborn defense, commitment to mission, and bravery. Turks and Americans served together against global terrorism in Europe, Asia, and America. Turks helped America in Kosovo, Somalia, Iraq, Afghanistan, and other places. Turkish commandos took over the power of peacekeeping in Afghanistan. What did the Armenians do? They made a deal and freely joined the Soviet Union and communism. The Armenians fought the US and the forces of the freedom and democracy for 70 years on the communist side. The Armenians continue their deceit today that they began in 1918. The Armenians are nowhere to be seen in helping the US win the war on terrorism. That is, except the fact that Armenians are selling equipment and knowledge of making weapons of mass destruction to Iran in violation of US law. And Russians literally own Armenia today with 2 massive military bases to protect Russian interests in Armenia. In the face of all this, the Armenian lobby, led by some unscrupulous politicians like Schiff and Menendez, are shamelessly asking the US taxpayers to send more and more of their hard-earned dollars to help the corrupt and violent Armenia. Each citizen in Armenia is helped about $478 to be exact, in the past 2 decades That is our hard-earned dollars going to a Russian puppet state. The common interpretation of Bristol as anti-Greek, anti-Armenian, and pro-Turkish by Armenian scholars cannot be substantiated by Bristol papers. On the Turks, he wrote in a letter to Frank L. Polk, dated December 4, 1920, I quote, "If things go as they are now going, I see France and England reestablishing the Turkish rule, at least over some part of this country. I have no use for the Turk, and above all, I never want to see Turkish rule established again," unquote. While his feelings towards the Greeks and Armenians were conveyed in typical fashion in a letter of May 3, 1920, which he addressed to Dr. Edward C. Moore, I quote, "The so-called Christians in this part of the world are the same as the Muslims. The whole of the old Ottoman Empire is in dire need of modern civilization and Christian development. This applies to all races and religions," unquote. Bristol reiterates numerous times his view that there is little to choose between the various races of the region. Here's a passage from a letter he wrote to Rear Admiral H.S. Knapp on August 26, 1919. I quote, "Those who know these people out here best know full well that the Armenians, Greeks, and Turks are all tarred with the same brush. It was simply that the Turks had the advantage of the position and full swing to their beastly desires. The massacre of Kurds and Turks by the Armenians during this war, when they got their chance, and the things that have been happening in Izmir, it means the fires, and the surrounding districts simply go to show what I have stated above," unquote. Bristol summarized his attitude towards the peoples of Anatolia in a letter dated December 27, 1920, to Mr. Walter George Smith in the following terms, I quote, "I have often said to you, these races in the Near East are all very much the same. And if you put them all in a bag and shake them up, you would not know which one would come out first," unquote. It is this shake 'em in a bag philosophy which typifies Bristol's attitude towards the indigenous peoples of Anatolia. As the selection of quotations given above indicate, only the most committed anti-Turk could in any way view this position as pro-Turkish. Bristol was first and foremost a product of his times. He was an American Protestant who believed that his brand of civilization alone held some promise for the future of mankind. This quotation from his correspondence illustrates this point. In his May 3, 1920 letter to Edward C. Moore, he wrote, I quote, "I hold no beef for any race in this part of the country. They all need universal education and modern civilization. The future peace of the world depends upon these races getting the benefits of modern development," unquote. Given this view of Bristol, how can anyone explain the widespread view in works of Armenian scholars of Bristol as pro-Turkish and anti-minority? One only must read the works of his predecessor in Istanbul, the racist and devious ambassador Henry Morgenthau, to answer this question. Contrast the tone of the following Morgenthau statement with that of the Bristol passages quoted earlier. I quote from Morgenthau, "Will the Turks be permitted by our cowardice in not striking back, to continue to treat all Christians in their power as unbelieving dogs? Or will definite steps be promptly taken to rescue permanently the remnants of these fine, old, civilized Christian peoples from the fangs of the Turk? Unquote. In short, Morgenthau was a confirmed Turkophobe, whose hatred for the Turks was matched only by his unabashed support for the Christian minorities under Ottoman rule. To anyone sharing Morgenthau's prejudices, Bristol's even-handed objectivity could only be interpreted as pro-Turkish. Bristol's insistence on the equality of Christian and Muslim alike marked a drastic change from Morgenthau's championing of the Christian element. It is this fact which accounts for his being incorrectly labeled as pro-Turkish and anti-minority. In Bristol's war diary entry of May 3, 1921, he provides a lengthy report of a conversation he held that day with Mr. G. T. White of the Near East Relief Committee, who had recently arrived in Istanbul from Kars. In the words of Bristol, George White, who had been in Kars at the time of the Turkish occupation, had the following to say regarding claims that Turkish forces had massacred Armenians in the city. I quote, "When questioned carefully in regard to the treatment of the Armenians by the Turks after they had occupied Kars, Mr. White stated that he did not know of any massacres and did not believe there had been any, except in the case of 2 villages where some Turkish officers had been killed by the Armenians, and in retaliation the Turks had wiped out these villages, and though he was not certain, he had no doubt that people in the villages had been wiped out. In one other case, he believes that about 30 Armenians were shot in Kars just after the occupation by the Turks. I asked Mr. White what he thought of the statement made by Mr. McCallum of the Near East Relief in a telegram to the United States stating that 80,000 Armenians had been massacred by the Turks. Mr. White did not reply to this question, but at first exclaimed, "Yes, I have talked to Mr. McCallum in regard to that." Mr. White had already answered this question by stating that there had been no wholesale massacre by the Turks. There was no doubt in my mind that Mr. White was embarrassed to find such a statement had been telegraphed to the United States. Unquote. To what extent have the contents of the Bristol papers been utilized by scholars dealing with Turkish-Armenian conflict between 1919 and 1921? Please join me next week to find out. Thank you and see you next week.